All right, it's time for another episode of the Awake Space Astrology Podcast. Pardon the laundry going in the background, but I don't have time to spare. I can't wait for it to finish. I need to do the episode. So the solstice is tomorrow, December 21st, 2021. It's been a heck of a year. The solstice marks the darkest day of the year, and from there on out, more light will come. And this is why we have festivals of light across the globe. Okay, we have festivals of light at the various solstices in the southern hemisphere. They tend to celebrate that more, except Australia, because it took on the Western traditions. But in other places, there's more celebrations in what we, in the northern hemisphere, call the summer solstice. The winter solstice for us is in December. Southern hemisphere will be having their summer solstice. These are important times of the year. And this year, it happens on December 21st. And I want to talk about that chart a little bit in this episode because there's some stress. And that stress is reflecting the stress of the globe. But there are things we can do about it. And FYI, I'm in a much better space post full moon in Gemini. Boy, did that pack a punch. And I want to talk about what you can do. Okay, it's going to be real easy to get in the glums and not feel the holiday spirit, whether it's Yule or whatever you're celebrating. I don't care what you celebrate, but it's a good time of year to have a celebration of some kind. If you can't celebrate some tradition because you have religious trauma, well, freaking celebrate yourself. And we're going to talk about that over the next couple of podcast episodes as we head towards the end of the year, because you have had an immense amount of growth this year. You are definitely not the person you were in January 2021. You are a whole new being thanks to the Saturn-Uranus square, which is fast approaching exact. So we're going to talk about this and what it means on a personal level, guys, because I'm going to talk about the mundane, and it's really easy to get freaked out about that, but you have so much agency, and we cover that in Cosmic Surfers. Okay, so if you want to learn more about how to work with the energy that is represented in the sky through astrology, Cosmic Surfers is the place to do that. That's what we're going to be focusing on a lot in the metaphysical school, in the mystery school that starts in 2022. We'll be talking about that too. So really what I see at the end of the year is a setup for 2022. And there's a lot of magic coming up, but there's also a lot of heck, a lot of what the heck coming on. So we're going to talk about that in this episode, plus more patron shout outs. Alrighty, so I am sitting here by my Christmas tree. It's all decked out. I do not celebrate Christmas as a religious holiday. I just like bling, and Christmas gives us a lot of that. I do enjoy the solstice. For me, it's personally an important day because it means from here on out we get light. And since I can't drive at night, that's just awesome. This is a day I look forward to every year because it offers me more freedom, which my Sag Mars is super happy about. The winter months have always been tough on me just because my mobility is lessened. And I think those of you who also have vision issues can hear that, feel that. I'm going to kind of burn through this episode a little bit faster than normal because I will be going live on TikTok about 7:30 p.m. here on the 20th of December. So don't be running off to go watch me live if it's not the 20th of December. So I'm going to try to get this episode knocked out. So we have the solstice tomorrow. It happens around, let me pull up the chart, about 8. Oh, where's my glasses? I can't find my glasses. Like 8. Oh, sorry. No, that is the day today. Let's get this. This is how you know this is like totally organic. Lori can't find her glasses. There, 8:15 a.m. Pacific-ish is the solstice. That is when the sun enters 00 degrees 00 minutes of Capricorn. So, something's going to happen on the East Coast, I think, or at least in Asia. It could be in Asia, but probably also the East Coast. There's going to be some big bada boom, because the moon will be coming out of opposition to Pluto, and Venus, because the moon will be at 27 degrees Cancer when the solstice happens. So there's probably going to be some early morning news for us on the West Coast, mid-morning news for the East Coast. God knows what it is. We'll just all find out Tuesday morning, won't we? I feel the Grinch is lurking about, and not the Grinch who's met Cindy Lou Who. Hopefully the Grinch will meet Cindy Lou, but that's probably next year. This could be international news, highly likely. We are days away from the nodes changing signs. I know a lot of people love to doom and gloom that. There's nothing to doom and gloom over with a nodal sign change, okay? The nodes change signs every 19 months, okay? Tick tock, it's the cosmic clock, all right? We don't need to freak out about things, all right? I'm going to have the frickin' south node scooting through my first house, which it's been scooting through my first house, but it's going to scoot through more. Okay. In fact, I had some of the best times with that south node on my Mars this year. So, don't freak out. There's no reason to freak out. You have agency. Okay. Don't let yourself be programmed by the people who are regurgitating the same information over and over. If you've seen 15 videos all saying the same thing by other astrologers, it doesn't mean it's correct information. It just means they've all sourced off of one another. Okay? It just means that it's not credible. All right? Go find the sources. Demand the sources. Okay? And there's even some famous astrologers out there. Just because they have good marketing doesn't mean they know what they're freaking talking about. Or it could be accurate according to traditional astrology, but traditional astrological interpretations do not necessarily apply verbatim to the world we live in today, because we don't live in the same freaking culture, and human beings do change over time. What was considered acceptable in your grandmother's day, or your great-grandmother's day, or your great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmother's day, they were all very different things, okay? Lest we forget, just over 100 years ago, it was not okay to show your ankles. 100 years ago was when the flappers started wearing short skirts to mortify everybody, and it was considered indecent and immoral, and the Charleston was the twerking of the day. Okay? So stop freaking out because other people making videos are trying to scare you. All right? Stop it. You have agency. Okay? So, yes, we're going to get some weird news. There's going to be some crazy weather. It's going to be wet. It's going to be wet going over the next couple of days. Even when the moon pops into Leo tomorrow, there could be some wind, there could be some lightning, we could see storms. This is climate change, guys. That Uranus Saturn square, the Saturn-Uranus square of 2021, the last one, is forming exact. The next couple of days, we're going to see extreme weather as that builds towards the 24th. It's just that simple. I've been talking about it all frickin' year. Okay? East of the Rockies, it's going to be most severe. Northwest is going to be wet, possibly cooler. Southern California is going to be wet and cooler. This is not going to end the drought. It will mitigate it. Okay? It will keep us out of a severe water crisis, but it will not end the drought. We just need to be grateful for the moisture we do get. COVID is expanding. I put out an astro alert, both on my blog and in the Patreon. COVID is expanding in 2022. I've talked about it cautiously. I've emphasized the wearing of masks since May 1. You can go back through the Patreon posts. I have been consistent. Well, I'm going to be insistent now because this is a group project and I'm really sick of people not wearing their masks. I know it's uncomfortable. Just do it anyway. Okay? I've bought a whole bunch of KN95s and I gave a bunch to my boyfriend. I'm going to be giving them to my daughter and son-in-law. I'm like, wear these. Okay? Because I don't think Omicron is going to be the last thing we see. Am I trying to scare you? No. I'm trying to give people information so we can stop the spread. You can't look at other people and go, well, they need to do their part. Yeah, okay, they're not going to, so you do you. You take care of you, okay? And if that means you have to isolate a little bit, okay, we'll do more activities in the Discord. Okay, if people are feeling socially isolated, we will make shit happen in 2022 to help connect people, all right? But don't go out, okay? Too much. Necessary trips only, and then sanitize the crap out of yourself. All right? Get your boosters. It'll help prevent worse sickness. Okay? We are going to see breakthrough cases, and it's a shame. And that's just because things mutated fast. Just like the flu vaccine this year isn't matched up with the flu virus, that wasn't an intentional thing. It's these types of things are hard for, even though they're scientists, it's hard to keep up with, okay? Don't listen to the conspiracy theorists, and we're going to talk a little bit about that in the next segment too. We're going to talk about how people who end up awake end up in conspiracy theory groups and why, because it's easy when you realize everything kind of around you is an illusion and it's hard to know what's reality and what isn't reality. And when you realize those authority figures were not trustworthy, it's really easy to get, involved with people who don't like authority figures either. But I can guarantee you, anybody who's trying to tell you that you don't have agency, there's these big bad guys trying to hurt you, blah, blah, blah. Nobody's trying to hurt you, right? Literally, unless somebody is, okay, like in your personal life. But nobody's trying to hurt you. It's just a gross level of incompetence. And then there's certain things, like with COVID, it's a new freaking virus. Nobody knows what it's going to do next. They've never seen it before. At some points, it's anybody's guess is as good as the next person, and they're gathering information and doing what they can as fast as they can. I've actually had conversations with some of the scientists on TikTok in private, the ones that are open to astrology, where I've said, hey, this is what I'm seeing for 2022. And they're like, that's what the models are looking like in the background. They're trying not to scare people too. Watch their faces. If they're starting to look tired and stressed out, just consider the information they're reading. Take all due caution. Do you need to be freaked out? No. Am I freaked out? No. Am I pissed off that I can't go be social? Kind of. I'm an introvert, but I still like meeting with people. If there wasn't COVID, we'd be having an LA gathering, or I'd be flying around, going to your town to see you and doing events. That's just going to have to wait. It's just going to have to wait. I can sit and whine about it, or we can do what we can with what we got, okay? So we kind of have to take the attitude of what people did in the Second World War, where you come together and you make stuff happen. All right, plant a victory garden, which, by the way, for 2022, I'm going to give you a gimme. You want to grow your food, okay? The harvest is going to be terrible. I'm going to be starting my seeds in January, and we'll do a follow along as we do our seeds and get our gardens going. Okay, I've got a ton of seeds. I've got my soil. I've got my grow bags. I'm going to start tomatoes because tomatoes are ungodly expensive. But again, I'm saying the same thing I've been saying for almost 3 years. Okay, so it's time to do some new holiday traditions. I know it's hard. If if you're used to getting together with family. I know it's hard. The holidays can be hard anyway, right? The holidays can be hard anyway, especially if you've got family trauma or you've got trauma around the holidays. But don't tell those stories aren't helping. We've got Mars in Sag, and Gemini isn't the only good storyteller. Sagittarius is the publisher, okay? It's the person in charge of production. It's theater. And you can put on a wonderful passion play. One of my very favorite books in the whole wide world is Little Women. And I don't know if you saw the latest rendition. I can't remember the name of the director. She did a wonderful job of making an adaptation of the book into a film. And it was a true hats off to people who love the book. It was a true hats off to people who love the book. I think it's like, other than the Katharine Hepburn version, I think this is my favorite one. And I went to see it the Christmas it came out. What was that, like 2018, with my daughter and my son-in-law. And I was surprised because I was like, are they going to make another bad rendition of one of my favorite stories of all time? And I have loved this book since I was 6 years old when I first read it. Yes, I read it when I was 6. And I so wanted to be Jo. I so was Jo. I would sit and eat my apple reading it to be like her. But one of the things, this takes place during the Civil War, right? This takes place during the Civil War, and their dad was away. And it was, they were 4 young women with their mother, and people don't understand how vulnerable that made them. Having no man around in the 1860s made them exceptionally vulnerable. And times were very hard, and there was poverty all around them. And so they made plays to entertain themselves and lift their spirits. That's a really Sagittarian, in fact, to me, Jo's always had a lot of Sagittarian energy, That's a very Sagittarian thing to do, to make a play. Hey guys, let's put on a play. Let's do something. We don't feel good right now. And with Mars in Sag during this holiday season, now is the time to tell a new story. Instead of saying, oh man, we can't get together like we want to. I'm really tired of this fucking pandemic. I feel like shit. I don't like this. I don't want to be isolated anymore. I'm tired. We're all traumatized. Like, the psychologists who keep going on about the collective trauma are doing more damage than good. Okay? And that's one of the things I hate about certain kinds of psychology, is like, oh, let's face the reality of the trauma. I'm not telling you to dissociate, except maybe I am. Because you know what? Dissociation is exactly what got me through a lot of trauma. Sure as hell did, because facing the reality would have killed me. Okay? And one of the things that really got me as a young woman was when I would say, it's going to be better. It's going to be better. I'll have a good life. I know I'll get through this. As I was walking my way through it, and I had several counselors before I was 25 tell me, oh, you need to be realistic and understand you have permanent damage. And I'd be like, okay, but I can still have a nice life. I can heal myself. I know the brain is magnificent. We don't know enough about it. You don't know that I'm forever damaged. No, you'll be damaged. They did more trauma in some ways than the actual traumatic event by talking about being realistic. Okay, I was very realistic about my obligations. I knew I would have to grow up and pay bills. I knew I would have to be able to have a job. I knew I was going to need to be able to take care of myself. I was not dissociative to the point where I thought I could sit in a corner and everything would turn out. I wasn't sitting there with a magic wand going, okay, work. I still was able to do certain things. I had a high level of functionality, we could say. But knowing it could be better and saying, okay, I'm in a shitty situation, so how do I make the best of where I'm at? how do I make the best of where I'm at right now? So, with my daughter and son-in-law, right? We are getting together. We are all very cautious and very careful about this about COVID, okay? We are not going to do a big falderall. In fact, we just about killed each other cooking all day on Thanksgiving. We were in that kitchen for hours. And that's our way of bonding, right? So I have my daughter's baking dish because they forgot it. And I said, well, how about I make a shepherd's pie, which I need to go out and grab a hand mixer because I forgot to do that today. But I'm going to make a shepherd's pie, and I'm going to have that so they can take it home and have leftovers because it's a big baking dish. And we're going to play Uno. And I told my daughter to bring her laptop, and maybe we'll play some video games, old school. We might play Diablo 2 on LAN or something. And just have some fun with that. Because I've got the TV set up, so we could hook up and play together. That could be fun. There's all kinds of things we can do. Is it gonna be like a normal Christmas? Probably not. It's very low key. It's just the three of us. It's not everyone we are used to having. They're not going to be out being as social as they normally are. Nobody's feeling that butthurt about it. And even if we canceled because of COVID, we'd be okay. And I gave her the option. I was like, hey, if you guys don't feel comfortable connecting, we don't have to meet up. I can either swing by and drop off your stockings and, bring your dish back. I could still, maybe cook for you if you want me to, but I can at least bring your dish back. And she was like, no, you're at home all the time. And so am I. And and he goes out, but we're fine. And I was like, okay, I gave the option. We would have been fine. So I know it's hard. I know you guys are used to being so busy, you don't have time to think. And you've been thinking and thinking and thinking all year long, all last year. And it's a lot. But we have this thing called the internet. And there's lots of cool stuff online, besides TikTok. There's games, there's art apps, you could learn new software. The best thing I saw from a psychologist, because let me give you a good side of psychology. I saw a great therapist, and I decided to follow her. I can't remember her name, but I loved what she had to say. And she's like, okay, we're at a stage where you can't use your normal coping mechanisms to feel better. You're going to have to start doing something new. And that matches up with exactly what I've been saying about this time. It's time to make new traditions. We have Venus retrograde in Capricorn, conjunct Pluto in Capricorn. It is time to make new traditions. Okay, the old traditions are not going to work. In fact, getting together with 60 people or being out in public in close confines is probably going to put you at risk, at serious risk. Okay, so it's time for new traditions. So learn something new. This is the time to start learning new things. Now, I know most of you went through a school system that punished you for getting the wrong answer, that made you have to seek only the right answer, which, by the way, there's always more than one right answer. I don't care what your teachers said. There's almost always more than one right answer. That's why I hate standardized tests, because I used to be able to prove it when I was in school. They would be like, well, there's only one right answer. And I'd be like, no, actually, this is such a vague question that depending on the scenario, this would be a correct answer, this would be a correct answer, and this would be a correct answer. Which one do you want would be my question. Learning what the teachers wanted was a skill. And learning what the curriculum said was a skill. But there's always different things. Mistakes are not fatal, guys. Take this from a South Node in Virgo with Pluto conjunct it. There is no fatal mistake unless it's a fatal mistake, unless it kills you. Okay. So let yourself make mistakes. Make 2022 the year of experimentation and imagination, because that energy and belief and whimsy and fantasy, that's what's going to get you through. Okay? Music and art and creativity is what's going to get you through next year. Not just baking sourdough, not just, learning a skill here and there, or learning how to brew the brew, although those are useful and helpful, but you want to know new things and you want to start learning new things. And this is the week to get inspired for that, because on December 24th, we have the final Saturn-Uranus square, and I want you to be really ready for bad weather. I want you to be ready for being out of power. I want you to be ready for all kinds of weirdness, all right? In fact, it's almost, I can't even prepare you anymore at this point. But I am telling you, get up off the floor and look at doing things differently, because luxuriating in bad feelings and over rumination right now is going to suck you right down into a hole that is so hard to get out of. And I have been there. I talked about that in Cosmic Surfers. I think in Living by Luna as well yesterday. When I was teaching those classes, I talked about the time I was in a healing process, and I ended up in so disembodied, to where I wasn't even hardly driving my meat suit, where you're just so out of your body. And learning to get back in. Once I got back in, I hit a wall of pain, because what was happening is I was avoiding the healing process because it was really hard. It was really hard. And when I hit back into my body, everything hurt. And I think that's where a lot of you are today. You've woken up, it all hurts. You're seeing everything in Technicolor, and holy fuck monkeys, it hurts. That's okay, because that's what makes you know you're alive. All right? So you're living, and it hurts. It doesn't have to keep hurting, okay? This is where you need to get support. And I highly suggest somatic therapies. Okay? Highly, highly, highly. Things that help you release the memories stored in the body. And it's emotional memory stored in the body. And traditional Chinese medicine helps with that really well. Not only did I work with changing my body postures to help rewire my brain, I used TCM to help clear my system, because I'd been living on cortisol most of my life and adrenaline. So clearing my system and learning to think differently about myself. And I'd been on that journey for a long time, but then I just combined the mental, the emotional, the spiritual, put them all together, because I'd learned them all in pieces. And when I unified it, that's when I could make real and lasting, enduring change in myself. And that's how I got to clear 0 clinical markers. And I'll be teaching parts of that next year, some of the beginning things. And I've been paving the way all year long in my readings and in my courses. Just teaching people how to be observational of self is huge. So this solstice is really ringing home the facts that we're going to have to change our traditions. You know what? They haven't always been around. They haven't. They've always been around in our memory, and maybe in our parents' and grandparents' memory, but they haven't always been around. Okay? When my great-grandmother was a little girl, and I know this because she said it every freaking Christmas, and it drove me nuts when I was a kid, but I'm glad she did. She got 1 orange, a handful of almonds, and they were treasures, and 1 doll. And it was the only doll she got all year long. And it lasted about a week, because she had 5 brothers, and 2 of them wanted to become doctors, and they would perform autopsies on her doll. So, yeah. And they were not an inherently poor family. Everybody got a present in that house. And in the early 1800s, that made them as close to middle class as you could be. because all of her brothers went to college, and college cost even then. So, we haven't always had all the traditions you think you've had. So it may be changing within your lifetime, but traditions happen for reasons. And so it's time for new ones. What traditions can you think of creating that might be fun? All right. All right, let's give some patron shout outs. This is my favorite time of the podcast. And again, pardon the dryer in the background. It's just adding some percussion. All right, use your imagination. Let's see. Let's get to the patrons. Patreon. How I love my patrons. All right. There's Discord going off. Oh my God, are we going to hit 300 patrons? Holy shit. This is cool. We are 10 away from 300. I don't think we've ever had 300. We've got Sarah, Carla, Kelly, Amilcar, Tafari, Alina, Lori, Ingrid, Karen, Monica, Natalie, Alicia, Miriam, Sarah. I think it's Sarah or Kira. Jay, Stacy, Bree, Rachel, Bambi, Jasmine, Tammy, Kristen, Cece, Laura, Alyssa, Bianca, Stevie Knits. Either that or it's Stevie. I think it's Stevie Knits. I like that. Hadsa, Sherry, Riley, Charlotte, Dana, Denise, Sabrina, Shelby, Lisette, Jackie, Layla, Molly, Nora, Francesca, Brandy, M. Thank you so much. And we got Iris, and we've got my mods. Oh my God, my mods. I haven't given them a shout out. I was in such a mood last time. Let's give a shout out to the mod squad. We've got Kathy, known as Sister Luck. We've got Casey, who's Casey. We've got Molly, who's Molly. And if you guys haven't met Absolute, that's Chris, who is also my my other pair of hands when it comes to getting readings out, etc. And all of the mods are going to be doing a whole lot of other stuff. So big shout out to my mods. I don't know what I would do without them. They mod on TikTok as well. So if you see them, give them a big shout out as well. It is extremely busy on the Discord. Our holiday venting channel is getting a little bit busy, and that's okay. That's what it's there for. I want people to feel comfortable venting in there. We'll probably keep it as a venting chamber because people need a place to siphon off energy. You can be spiritual and not have to be high vibes all the time. Oh my God, it's 721. That's my birthday number. I love it. So big shout out to my patrons. If you guys haven't signed up, you guys all got different discount codes depending on your levels for the December 26th, 2022 astrology seminar. Show up to that if you can, because next year it's not like 2021. It's not a roller coaster, but it is like a labyrinth with a lot of fog and some slippery moments, some surprises. And towards the end of the year, there'll be some shocking events. But the year kind of starts off with a bang because, we're living in a time of enduring change, and enduring change doesn't happen easily. Trust me, I've lived a lifetime of it. But I can tell you, as I've said all along, those of you who have struggled more pre-COVID, pre-pandemic, you guys are actually well prepared for the reality of now. So it's people who have mostly been very busy living on a kind of automatic pilot who have had the big rude awakening, and it's a little harder to deal with that. So anywho, my friends, that is what is up. We're going to keep this episode short. I promise I'll do another one this week. And I will do something on the 24th. I'm not doing any readings that day, but I'm going to be going out on a date, kind of. It's not like in public. So, and it's somebody I'm very close to. So that's kind of fun. So it's one of my pod people. So that should be good. But anywho, my beloveds, deep breaths, and know that just because things don't work out the way they always have doesn't mean it is the end of the world or it's horrible. It just means new traditions get to be made. Much love, and see you live on TikTok here. I've got about 7 minutes and I need to go change and go look festive. Okay, my laundry's done. I finished my live stream. It's being uploaded to YouTube because people requested that. I got on a roll. I started talking politics. And for those of you who know me, you know I have a political bent. And one of the reasons I came out very publicly as an astrologer, it used to be I was referral only and you had to know people to get into me. Because it wasn't always safe to be an astrologer where I lived. But I've always been politically active. And I'm firing people up, getting them ready for Pluto in Aquarius in 2024. And I think it's important. And I was on a roll. So people are like, please be recording this. And I'm like, well, TikTok records it. And if there's not a glitch, I'll get it up on YouTube. So it's uploading right now. I realized after I hit the publish button on this thing, I promised to tell you why people get caught up in conspiracy theories once they quote unquote awaken, or they get involved in fringe groups when they suddenly, kind of awaken to the way things are, and authorities aren't trustworthy. And I didn't really talk about that much in that second segment because I was moving pretty quick so I could go live stream. For those of you who were worried about me, you may not have heard the very end. I said I had to get off for a family call. My daughter was calling. So I was taking her call because when either one of my kids calls and it's late at night, I take the call because it's usually something's up. Sometimes they just want to talk. Somebody just needed to vent a little bit. So it wasn't an emergency. It was just a mom. And I am happy to be there for those calls. I'm grateful that my kids want to talk to me, When I was their age, I did not want to talk to my parents. So I'm always glad to be there for them. Even if I can't make it better, I can't fix it, I can commiserate with them, and that's important to me. So sorry if I worried you, but that's what it is. So let's talk about why people get caught up in fringe groups and what can seem like odd conspiracy theories. Some of it is, and I was talking a little bit about this in Cosmic Surfers, but I think it's important we start teaching this. So first of all information, if you are in a human body, I don't care if your soul came from, Alpha Centauri or the Pleiades or Omicron Persei 7. That's a Simpsons reference. By the way, all those people saying that the Simpsons predicted Omicron. God, I saw some TikToks. I'm like, you do realize Greek alphabet is used in science, and that's why some things are named like that out in space. And anyway, oh God, the American education system is so bad. But anyway, and granted, I was a little geekling. I learned to read on my own. Some of you know the actual story. So I had some help from my friends that were incorporeal, but I learned to read at the age of 2. And I wasn't reading baby books, and I was a voracious devourer of knowledge. And that is why I can tell you with abject certainty, it is not enough to understand theory. It's not enough to understand knowledge, have facts and figures in your head. If you don't know how to apply that knowledge, you might as well not even have that knowledge, okay? Because it doesn't do you any good if you don't know what to do with it. And that's what happens when we awaken. When we wake up, however old you are when it happens, it might happen as a kid. It might happen as a teenager. It might happen in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, your 50s, your 60s, right before you die. Doesn't matter. And it doesn't happen for everybody. Okay. So for some people, their job in this lifetime is to be asleep. They serve a purpose and they are not always out of alignment. Just because you're not awake does not mean you're out of alignment. Okay. This is some deep metaphysical stuff, and you can't sit in judgment of other people. It's really, really easy, but what you're doing is you're harping on yourself. Okay, you're harping on yourself. And I know, because I've done it. I've been that arrogant cur. I've done it. And it can be frustrating, but we are all asleep in some way or another, and we can be awake and asleep at the same time. Okay, it's what are you conscious of? What are you not conscious of? What do you want to be conscious of? What do you not want to be conscious of? There are times we just don't want to get up, right? You ever had one of those days where you just didn't want to get out of bed for whatever reason? Well, there's that way for consciousness. And sometimes it'll be like information overload, and you're just like, okay, I've seen enough for right now. I just don't want to look anymore for right now. I just don't want to. That's okay too. All right. We have this idea that's been proliferated by the quote unquote intelligentsia that you must be aware. You must be aware. What are you going to do with it? Being aware. Okay, I see a problem. If you can't do anything about the problem, if you can't help with the problem, if you don't become active, but you're aware, are you not complicit in the problem? In some ways, yes. In some ways, there are things you cannot do a damn thing about. Physically, So, okay, we can be aware. You have to take action of some kind. We're in a physical reality. So when you look at some of the more, my Libra moon talking, and all of you from the South will understand me, the more interesting metaphysical subjects. When you have people channeling information, and I do channel. I do. You'll never know when I am channeling. You might know because my voice might be softer. It's usually very encouraging information. The syntax might change just slightly. If you have the ability to look at energy, you'll notice a switch in my energy. But in general, you won't notice much because I worked really, really hard not to have all the weird voices and all the weird things happen. Oh, and yes, the metaphysical school, we will be teaching channeling if you want to learn, because anybody can do it. But you got to be careful with it. I mean, there's some physical things you need to do to not kind of overload your circuits, and because that's what's happened with some of the more, there are some well-known channels, and I'm not talking about Esther Hicks. She does it right. I've actually been in the room. I've witnessed her energy patterns, and the information is all coming in through her crown. And that's when you know it's the good stuff. And I don't just mean like good versus evil. I mean, it's being done well, and it's not challenging her system. And they talk about that. They talk about the process, which is good. But some of the more interesting information that kind of divests humanness from having any form of divinity, divests humanness from any agency or power, anything that takes it away, like we're pawns in a galactic war. There's all these extraterrestrials running everything, and Queen is a lizard person. I'm not going to say it couldn't be possible because anything can be possible. But what I am going to say is you have to consider the filter through which the information is being channeled. Okay? So we are so used to believing in outside agencies. And when you leave a particular kind of religious indoctrination where you believe there are things outside of our control, and that, as far as our agency, etc., that is a problem. It is a problem because then you look for people who have the answers. So if you come from a tradition where you are being told what to think and believe and not to question, okay? And that would be any belief system that tells you questioning is bad. And so you look for authorities on the subject. And so then you want to be told what is right to believe. I get asked that all the time. What's right to believe? Well, I don't know what's right to believe. What is right? What is wrong? Even that do no harm thing. I don't know. There's stuff we perceive that could be harmful that I don't know that it's always harm. I lived in nature for a long time. I lived on an island in a forest. I watched the critters. And I love how people who don't spend a lot of time in nature make it sound like everything's always getting along all the time. In fact, I was at this spiritual retreat. I was teaching a course on resistance patterns and how to work with resistance because, man, am I good at it after millions of Pluto transits. And I was the queen of resistance. And so teaching people how to identify physical resistance, emotional resistance, mental resistance, and how to work with it and release it. And so I was a teacher at this retreat, and there was a very famous person, and I'm not going to mention their name because they don't need any traffic. And they were in a debate with another well-known person, and they were all in the raw food movement. I was like the only person who wasn't a raw fooder at this retreat, which is how I opened up the resistance class. Oh God, it was funny. But anyway, I knew the organizers. It was just funny. Okay, it was funny. And people loved my class, but oh my God, my friend was just like, oh, I can't believe you said that. All right, I'll tell you if you must know. I opened the class with, how do you all feel with knowing that I eat meat? Oh, Jesus God. The collective gasp was worth every moment, and my friend got up and literally walked out of the room. She was embarrassed. I thought it was hilarious. And I was like, okay, what you just experienced is resistance. Now, let's talk about how your body feels. Oh, my Venus and Gemini in the 8th house. Damn, it's a joker. It's like being Loki sometimes. But anyway, so this evening there was this debate over something. It was like fermented foods or whatever. And human beings are hilarious in how they can argue over anything. Now, the more famous person didn't have very good scientific arguments for what they were doing. And he was kind of getting mopped up on the floor by the other guy who was well known but not as famous. And I'm not going to lie, there was a little white supremacy involved and a little anti-Semitism because the other person happened to be Israeli and Jewish. And the famous person was not and was using white male privilege, which was pissing me off. And nobody was calling him out for it either. I was getting annoyed. And he didn't have the facts. He wasn't using science. And he got literally went into this thing of I've been in Africa and I've seen lions and gazelles be at the same drinking, water hole. And have the fermented fruit and play and frolic together. And I was like, he's describing the Lion King, because I too have been to Africa. So like, he knew the odds of anybody else having been to another continent in that room, given where this was at, were low. And the other guy, again, Israeli doctor, he was like looking at him like, what are you on? Like, he couldn't even argue at that point. He was just staring with his mouth over, like, what is this guy on? And so, you know, sometimes people are losing an argument. They come up with some dozies. I actually had to walk out at that moment. I like could not stand it, because I was not going to be able to keep my mouth shut, because I was going to be like, are you discussing Simba? It's like, it doesn't work that way. I have lived in nature. Let me tell you, I have seen animals get along in really weird ways. Like my cats and the raccoons, they got along. They did. Doesn't always work out that way. But my mama cat had kittens when this raccoon had kids, and they came up with like this arrangement about the cat food outside. And those kittens and those little raccoons grew up together and into adulthood had an arrangement. Okay. And my cats knew the difference between these guys and the marauding raccoons. Like, I observed things. Like, I lived isolated, guys. Think of a 12-year pandemic where all you could do was observe nature around you. Right? May you never have to go to those depths in your understanding. I did it, hopefully, so you don't have to. But anyway, I saw birds make friends with unlikely animals. And then I saw full-out wars go on that were brutal. Okay, I observed the plants. I observed the trees, flowers. You know, I observed everything. Sometimes nature can be just like a very cruel place. And sometimes it's a very beautiful place. And sometimes it's beautiful cruelty. And sometimes, you know, somebody pushes somebody off a rock because they're bored and they think it's funny, and animals do it too. Okay. I watched, like, I had garden gnomes. Okay. None of my other cats cared. I had like 5 cats at one point, because again, in this forest, there were these things called rodents, and there were very large wharf rats. Again, it was an island surrounded by salt water. So I had a bunch of cats that took care of rodents. And they were indoor, outdoor kitties. They got to come in inclement weather. They got to decide when they wanted to be in. And mine were really smart. Like, I never had one taken by an eagle or a hawk or anything. Like, they were really clever, and they organized. They were very social. They had their own communication style. Like, I tell you, I spent a lot of time watching these critters. But I had one of those cats. Her name is Diddles. She's still alive. She's 14 years old. She lives with my son. She was too old to relocate, you know. And anyway, she's living her best life now. But anyway, she would run up to the gnomes. And I called her the gnome bully, because she'd run up and push them over. Like she was offended by my gnomes. And I wish, you know, if TikTok, she would have been a TikTok viral video, just the way she bullied these garden gnomes. And none of the other cats would just watch her and be like, I don't know what your problem is, bro, but okay. So nature isn't always in concert and you know, la la la, unity. No. It's not. Sometimes there's a gnome bully. And so through our own lens, which is why I tell you to train your Mercury, train your mind, learn critical thinking, learn how to parse information, learn how to feel into what is true for you and what isn't true for you. I will never tell you that something isn't possible, because I believe all things are in the realm of possibility, but how likely is it? I'll give you some odds, okay? Because there's possibility and there's probability, okay? There's a difference. And so when people become awakened and they've maybe left the standard norm, they feel rejected because they're rejecting something else. You may feel rejected by your community or your family because you've walked away because your eyes were open. And if you came from anything that is slightly evangelical, okay, slightly committed to getting other people to be believers, like the amount of people, it's kind of scary, who ask me, how do I feel about people who don't believe in astrology, or call people who don't believe in astrology non-believers. I'm like, well, astrology isn't a belief system, not Western tropical astrology. It's not tied to a belief system. The type of astrology I practice, it's a field of study. Okay? It's a field of study within metaphysics, but it is a field of study. You do not have to believe in the orbits of the planets around the sun for it to be a thing. It's like gravity. You don't have to believe in it to have the effects of it. Okay? Just don't. Gravity will have you falling on your ass every single time. You don't have to believe. You can say, I don't believe in you, gravity. Trip over a rock. Whoop, there you go. Okay? If you saw the live stream, then you know, yes, I did have a wee bit of schnapps, so I'm going to be a little more humorous. It's in my hot cocoa, and there's not very much. But it's actually tasty. And I'm not even buzzed. I'm just tired and a little relaxed. But anyway, I digress. Let's bring you back. So you feel rejected because you've rejected something, because it's now offended you. And you may have lots of good reasons for it to have offended you. When I left the church at 17, and it wasn't the first church I left a non-denominational church in 1982. I was 13, because it went from being a pretty easygoing church that preached the love of Jesus, kind of pretty good doctrine. Is a little conservative in that they didn't believe in gambling or drinking, but that was because that particular kind of church formed during the Prohibition era, and there were really good reasons why people didn't want people drinking, smoking, and gambling, because it impacted a lot of families, right? That's where some of that theology came from. But in general, it wasn't like a condemn you to burn and rot in hell kind of place. It just wasn't. But in 1981, 82, things started to change, and we got some new people coming in. And it might have even been as early as like 1980, because I hadn't turned 10 yet. And I was in a Sunday school class, and the teacher, and he was pretty new to the church, told our whole Sunday school class that Lutherans went to hell, like Lutherans and Catholics went to hell. And I was really sensitive on that subject, because I was raised on the story that the Lutheran pastor of the church in the neighboring city would not christen me as a baby because my mom was a heathen, because she belonged to that non-denominational church and wasn't a Lutheran, and she wasn't going to become Lutheran. So I was raised on that story. But my dad was Lutheran, and my grandma was Lutheran. So one half of my family went to one kind of church, and the other family went to another kind of church. And I was really sensitive on the hating side of things. And I was really concerned by the idea of hell, because I have a really, really sensitive Neptune. My Neptune is in my first house in Scorpio, and it is trying my Mercury and my Sun. I have a very expansive imagination. I can do virtual reality in my head. I don't need Oculus to play virtual reality. I can see full out images in my head. I can make up things in my head. So when you talk about stuff like that, when I was a kid, that would give me nightmares. And so I stood up in the class and I was like, whoa, you cannot say that. And I started quoting Bible verses at him. And I went and I told on him. And he wasn't allowed to teach that Sunday school class anymore, because I grew up in that church. I went and I told my favorite Sunday school teachers. And they're like, whoa, we don't go around saying that. So he was admonished and no longer allowed to teach. But then it got worse. And things got really, I had one kind of cool Sunday school teacher. I learned some Greek and some Hebrew, and that was kind of cool. A little more history. I thought that was kind of cool. Not all of it was accurate. I found out later when I started studying actual history in college. But, at least it was interesting to examine. And then they started having people testify. And I have a Libra moon. And I was going through a lot. Remember, I went through a lot of trauma as a kid. And this kid was afraid because he joined the military. And he was up crying. Now I know we live in a very different world now. But you have to remember, I'm a little Gen Xer. Okay? So this supposed grown-up, to me, because I was like 13, right, was sitting bawling his eyes out about a decision he made. Now, I know the military makes all kinds of promises. I do. I didn't then. I was 13, and I was a bit of a smart ass. But I was like, dude. Now, remember, I also have a very strong Saturn that is unaspected in my chart. So I had consequential thinking developed a little bit early in life. But I was like, dude, you made a decision. Now you're crying about it. Suck it up, buttercup. I was like, why are we crying here? Now, I think it's a beautiful thing if people feel they can be vulnerable somewhere now as an adult. But at 13, with all the crap going on in my life, I could not afford those kinds of emotions in public. And it was very uncomfortable. I was like, I'm not good with this. And I left. I was just like, I'm just not okay with that. It feels really weird and really strange. And also, like, it was just like, well, then don't join. I don't know why he joined. I was just disturbed. Now, again, was that a nice thing? Probably not. My thinking was a 13-year-old's thinking. And again, I couldn't afford that kind of vulnerability. I'm glad he found support, because he did. He had a lot of people supporting him. And as an adult looking back, I'm glad that young man found support in that congregation. That was nice, But as a 13-year-old, I was like, nope. And so my grandmother, who was Lutheran, was very disturbed that I wasn't going to church anymore. And so she asked me to go to church with her. But I was a little jaded. I didn't believe Lutherans went to hell, but I was a little mad that they dissed on my mother. And so I agreed to go to church with her. And I was in the adult confirmation class trying to make my grandma happy. But I got annoyed because of the questions being asked because I was in I was 14 at that point. And there were old people asking if they'd get what they wanted in heaven. And it just seemed really petty stuff. And I was like, one, they had no imagination. So I was getting frustrated with other people. And remember, I was a teenager, so I was really self-absorbed, because all teenagers are. And I put up with it. But I ended up walking out and just saying, I can't do this class because this is ridiculous. They're asking the pastor, like, well, will I see my loved ones in heaven? And I'm like, well, of course you will. Why wouldn't you? To me, it was just like why not? Why would you not see the people you love? And why would you not be restored to being whole? Like if you lost a limb or you had an ailment, why would you not be restored after you die? Like, to me, those were like no-brainers, and I didn't understand other people had other experiences and what have you. Because again, I was a teenager. So I didn't leave the church yet, but I refused to finish confirmation, and I dared the pastor to not give me communion in front of the congregation, because he's like, well, if you don't finish this, you can't take communion. I'm like, I've been taking communion since I was 9 years old. I was baptized. I may not have been baptized in this church, but communion is a sacrament of the Christian body. And if I want to take communion, I can. He's like, well, you just want grape juice and crackers. And I was like, I got told that at 9 years old, and I had to argue with the elders of the church to get baptized. And what he didn't know is I found a loophole so that if my dad did go to hell, I could offer myself in his place so he didn't rot in hell for eternity. That's a whole nother story. It wasn't because of what the Sunday school's teacher said. No 9-year-old should be worried about their parents' eternal salvation. That's all I have to say. But anyway, so I was just like, fine. I'm going to go do it, and you can stop me in front of the whole congregation. He didn't stop me. He didn't have the balls to do it, which was funny because he was a middle-aged white dude. So afflict the comfortable, right? Comfort the afflicted. So I carry on with this. I sing in the choir. I'm making my grandma happy. Like, I loved my grandma so much. And to make her happy and make her proud, because I never felt like we worked this out in my 30s. But when I was a young person, I always thought I wasn't good enough for my grandma. So here I'm making my grandma happy, and it's all awesome. Oh, God. Anyway, at 17... And for those of you who've been 17-year-olds, you know how squirrely we can be. If you're 17 now, you might be squirrely yourself. So 17. Now, I was one of those people who would help out at the Sunday breakfast at church. This was a German Lutheran church. There was food every Sunday. Like, this was not a once a month pancake breakfast kind of church. There was serious coffee hours with homemade food, and a couple times a month we had like ham breakfasts, and I would wash those damn dishes. So, and I knew what food was down in that fellowship hall. I did, because I had helped put it away. Right? So we go through a long sermon about charity. And then the call to action, oh yeah, it was a call to action, all right, was to buy this stupid soap, this Lutheran soap, because my grandma would buy like things like Lutheran coffee and Lutheran soap. And I'm like, because soap has a denomination? But anyway, buy this Lutheran soap that helped these people in the Philippines. Like, the purchase of it somehow helped them. And I'm like, or we could just send them money. Like, why do we have to buy soap? Why can't we just give them money? It's like, oh, God forbid, what will people do with money? But anyway, I was already kind of irritated by the sermon and by everybody, like, being very performative in their oohing and ahhing and tut-tutting and these poor savages somewhere else, because that was really the attitude. And it was just, I was, my little Saggy Mars and my 9th house Sun and Mercury were just like grit in my teeth. I was getting angry. And we finish and we're getting ready to go to lunch. Everybody's glad handing and giving each other, blessing one another. What is it? The peace offerings, peace be upon you and upon you, my friends, all of that good stuff. And we're on the steps of this very venerable church, and it's a beautiful building, this very venerable building. And this old dude in his 50s, as I say this, I'm in my 50s, but this old dude, at least in his 50s, because I was 17, so he was old to me. When I call myself an old chick, I'm thinking like I would have thought when I was 17, And so he's reeking. He's reeking. His face is red. He is an obvious alcoholic. He's very drunk. He is most likely homeless. He stumbles up to this group, and I'm stuck talking to these old ladies anyway, and they're all like, oh, you're such a lovely girl, Irene's granddaughter, blah blah blah, blessings upon you. And this old man comes up, and they viscerally wrinkle their noses. And yes, the man did stink, okay. He just reeked to high heaven. But I'm very empathetic, and I was an empath, uncontrolled and untrained, and I could feel the waves of pain coming off of this man. And I mean, the amount of pain, and it wasn't just physical pain, it was emotional pain. And he came up and he said, I'm hungry. Can I have some food, please? And I was like, yeah, let me go get you some. And this old lady put her hands on me. And she said, no, don't do that. And I said, he didn't ask for communion wine. He asked for food. And I moved my arm out of her arm and I went to go downstairs to get the man a plate of food. He asked for a plate of food. And this other person stopped me and said, what if he comes back? And I'm like, what if he does? That's our job. We just had a sermon on charity. The man just asked for food. You guys, this could be Jesus sitting right here in front of you doing a test, right? And of course, Lutherans don't think that way. And so I was like, what the utter F? Because at that age, I did not swear. I was a real straight arrow. I did not swear. And I was absolutely flabbergasted because at my old church, even before it went evangelical, they would have given a homeless person a plate of food if they had it. And that church did not do a lot of food because there were a lot of people who didn't have a lot of money there. They had little coffee hours, The coffee was weak. It was usually store-bought cookies. The Lutheran church was like all out food, okay? And there was plenty of leftovers. And I got stopped. I literally had 4 or 5 people holding me from walking into the church. And it was very biblical, actually. And I shrugged them off. And this poor man, he was crying, And again, he was an older man. This is, again, the 1980s. It would have been about 1986 because I was 17. He was crying. I'll never forget his face. He was sobbing. And I thought, my God, have you considered maybe he grew up because he knew there'd be food. He knew there'd be food. He probably grew up in that church. Oregon City, Oregon is not a big town. It didn't have a big population in the 80s. I can tell you that much. That man probably grew up going to that church and knew there was food and he went there for some comfort. Really, what if he did go back and stopped drinking? What if he didn't stop drinking, but he came back and he shaped up a little bit and got cleaned up a little bit? Oh my God, who was that hurting, right? And I was so mad because at 17, I could see it clear as day. And all these old ladies were more worried about what if this stinky man entered their sanctuary. And I was so angry. And I literally, I rebuked them all in the name of Christ. And I started quoting the Bible. And I started quoting what they call the red letter parts, which is where they attribute the words to Jesus. And I was on hell, fire, and brimstone. And when you guys have seen me get on a roll, like on the TikTok tonight, when I'm on a roll, man, I'm a preacher. Okay, I wanted to be a preacher so bad when I was a little kid. That was what I wanted to be. So I guess I still am. I just do it in different ways. And I am an ordained spiritual humanist reverend. So if you ever need to get married or buried, I could do it in 48 states. But seriously, I was just absolutely, in fact, it took multiple people to bundle me down the stairs of this church, and these are stone steps, and put me into the back of the car as my grandmother was in her very best, her best friend at the time was like a Southern belle from Mississippi, and she would like put on airs, right? So my grandma was like putting on airs like her friend Ruth. And she's like, what about your eternal soul? And I just looked at her and went like, mine's fine, but the rest of you need to take a real hard look at your own. I never backed off. I was like, I will never enter another church again. I'm done. And that just put my grandmother into an epileptic fit. She was just like, oh, God, her blood pressure. I'm like, yeah, whatever. My blood pressure. What is wrong with you people? So Grandma had our neighbor, who was a world-renowned theologian, talk to me. And Pastor Figgy was a wonderful, wonderful man. He was a very learned man. He was a very kind man. He was in his 80s at the time. The man lived to be 103. He was a wonderful neighbor. His wife, Anne, was very dear to me. I had no idea she had really bad hay fever, and I would festoon her with flowers. And she would take them graciously and then run through her house and throw them out the other side of the door. I did not find out until she passed away years later. They were wonderful people. So Grandma has Pastor Figgy talk to me, and I give him all my reasons why I am never stepping back foot in a church, what was wrong with those people. And he was like, you are absolutely right. And you were right that day. We should have given him food. You are absolutely correct. He wasn't there that day, because if he was there, that man would have gotten food. I can guarantee it. He would not have put anybody aside. He was a good man. The other pastor, I didn't like him too much. He was way more on the conservative side. Pastor Figgy wasn't conservative. He was a cool old dude. And he was like, you're right. You're right. The only thing I'm going to ask, and he goes, you're right. It is a crutch for people. The only thing I'm going to ask is you might need that crutch someday. So can you just say you're not going to step into a church right now, that you're not going to, it never is a really long time. You might need that kind of support someday. You might be a hypocrite someday and you need that. And I was like, okay, fair enough. Okay, I can take the never out of it. And he was right. There were a couple times in my life where that was the best way I could connect in, was go to a church with a friend or whatever, where I got some sentimental comfort or even a spiritual happening. All kinds of churches and religious buildings. So, that was pretty wise. But he also had to deliver the news to my grandma that I was not going back. And it was the only time in my life I heard my grandmother raise her voice, because my grandmother never raised her voice, ever, because she believed when you get angry, you lose control, and then you lose the argument. And so when I heard her go, what? I didn't stick around. I lived next door. I was out that parlor door so fast and back to my house so fast. I was a chicken. I didn't mind standing up to a whole congregation, but my grandma being mad at me, man, I ran. But so and I use these as examples, okay? So that one of the things that I noticed as I got older is I would reject things because of my own worldview. And so I don't reject stuff like that anymore. I think Pastor Faggy said some really wise stuff to me of like, yeah, we're all hypocrites. Everybody is. Me too. We're all human. Yep, we are. And it doesn't matter what belief system you come from, but when you leave it, you want to be careful, because that judgment is a sticky line, and you could be condemning yourself as equally as you are condemning those people to standards you can't live up to. Okay, so there's that. Second of all, if people are channeling information, so like when people are like, oh, the stuff from the 19th century has white supremacy in it. Well, yeah, because of the time period. Okay. Even the people fighting for abolition would have had white supremacy in their speech patterns and in their belief patterns, because that's where we'd got to, okay? Even if they believed people were people, right? There was still, and they shouldn't marry white people. There would have been some of that. There would have been very, very few people who thought anything different. And I'm not making excuses. I'm just explaining it. And so today, it's really easy when we feel out of control and we're used to having a sky daddy and we've left a religion, or a sky mommy, some kind of god. It's really easy to look at it being aliens or another deity or. And I've walked all those walks. I've investigated all those things in my time. Because when you leave a religion, it's really uncomfortable not to have some kind of belief system if you've been indoctrinated or enculturated to have one. One, you lose your social group. So some of why people go to church or any religious body is because of the social aspect, because human beings are social beings. And so losing that fellowship is very hard. It feels like an amputation in some ways. And so people will gather together looking for like minds. Well, like minds can be really dangerous because it can be groupthink. And what I've learned over the last 30 some years, is that I'm looking for like-hearted people. We don't have to all think the same. But if we're genuinely, and generally lined up in the heart space, then things go pretty well. We don't all have to think the same way. You can believe in starseeds and aliens and that you are one. And I'm going to say, okay, cool. I'm never going to tell you you're not. I don't know. You have your own truth. It's not my job to tell you who you are and who you aren't. I'm going to read your astrology chart, which is about your human body. Okay? I can tell you your soul's intent in that body. Where your soul is from, I cannot tell you. Only you will know that. Okay? That's just the way it goes. Okay? That's just the way it goes. So, before you ask me if something is real or not, ask yourself, why are you believing what you're believing? And what about is being said is resonating with you? And why is it resonating with you? Because a distrust of authority, that's freaking healthy. But are you supplanting it with somebody else as an authority figure? Okay? Are you looking for another authority? And I don't even want that to be me. Okay? Capiche? All right. So this is how you get caught up, is just different belief systems. So part of the Modern Mystery School will be helping you learn to ask really powerful questions of yourself and other people to help determine what is true for you. Not my truth, not somebody else's truth. And there's a difference between a fact like gravity, like a planetary orbit, and then interpretation differences. That is more of the artistry. So the semantics, okay? Learning how to filter through those and understand those is a little bit different than working with, up is up and down is down, okay? So that's some of what we're going to do in 2022, which is perfect timing because we got a lot of Pisces action next year. So that's my pulpit. I will now step off my soapbox, and I hope you have a really wonderful, wonderful solstice.